We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Beis Amid Beis Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 42b. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says, let's say you have a carbon and the carbon has more than one matir. For example, let's say you have an inner carbon chatos where all of the applications of the blood are required, so therefore they're all considered a matir of the carbon. So Rabbi Meir said, if a person has a machsheves pigul, an intention to consume the carbon outside of the proper time, even by one of those applications of the blood, so then we say that it is in fact going to be pigul. And Reish Lakish said in explaining Rabbi Meir, don't assume that Rabbi Meir means mefaglin b'chatzi matir, that even though it's half of the matir, it's not the entire matir, still a machsheves pigul can create pigul in such a situation. That is not what Rabbi Meir means. Rather, what Rabbi Meir means is if the intention of pigul was in the first of those matirim, and then the rest were done in silence with no spoken intention whatsoever, so we assume that they're all al das rishona, we assume that they're all being done with the same intention as the first one, and so therefore essentially there was a machsheves pigul throughout the entire matter. That's actually the explanation of Rabbi Meir. And the Gemara had asked a question from a brisa, because the brisa had been talking about, again, this case of the inner carbon chatos, and it talked about bein barishona, bein bishniya, bein bishlishis, whether the first applications of the blood, the second, the third, you have a machsheves pigul in any of them. Rabbi Meir says that it's going to be considered pigul. And so you see, even if it's not the first one, so you can't say al das rishona, but still apparently Rabbi Meir is saying mefaglin b'chatzi matir. And on the previous summit, Rav Ashi answered that actually what the brisa means is the person had a machsheves pigul in the first, second, and third applications, but not in the fourth. And the idea is exactly that idea of al das rishona. And so then the question is, why give a case where it's the first, second, and third? Just say the first, and then we'll say al das rishona, whatever intention he had by the first application of blood, that's going to be for all of them. And so the Gemara explained the reason why we specifically give that scenario in the brisa is because one might think, well, why is the person speaking out the intention by the first, second, and third applications, and then by the fourth he's silent? Doesn't that indicate that the fourth one is not being done with the same intention as the others? And so we say no. We still say we apply the rule of al das rishona, that the intention he had at first continues onward in the subsequent applications of the blood. And the Gemara now continues and says, "V'habein bein katani." How can you interpret the brisa in that fashion? It doesn't say that he had this machsheves pigul by rishona, shniya, and shlishis. It says bein barishona, bein b'shniya, bein b'shlishis. It sounds like in any one of them, not in all of them. Rashi explains v'habein bein katani to mashma o bazu. It's understood as meaning in either one of them, in any one of them. That does not seem consistent with Rav Ashi's explanation of the brisa. And the Gemara says kasha. The Gemara leaves that as a question. And the Gemara continues, Amar Mar, the master said, Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Meir says, pigul v'chayav and all of kares. It is pigul and there's a liability to kares. And this is Rabbi Meir in Menachos. It's the original Rabbi Meir that we brought. It's Rabbi Meir over there that says this idea again, that even if he has the machshava by just one of the matirin, that's going to create pigul. And Rashi explains, Amar Mar, the master said, Aman de mahader lu'ukmei, time with Rabbi Meir mishum mefaglin b'chatzi mater kaparach. Right now the Gemara is asking on the one who understands Rabbi Meir as saying mefaglin b'chatzi mater, meaning we're not going with Reish Lakish's interpretation of Rabbi Meir of al das rishona. Rather, we're just saying even if you have a machsheves pigul in one of the two matirim, let's say, that's enough to create pigul. And so Rashi continues, Nihinami deve'alma b'komitz u'levona ikol meimer mefaglin b'chatzi mater. Granted that in general, by let's say komitz and levona, that's the fistful and the frankincense by a carbon mincha, we can say mefaglin b'chatzi matir. That might be true by a carbon mincha. Ela b'chatzi zrika, but let's say half the zrika, let's say there's more than one application of blood. Heichi Amar Rabbi Meir pigul. How can Rabbi Meir even say in that situation pigul? We can understand it by the carbon mincha, but we cannot understand it by zrika, as the Gemara now continues and says again, Amar Mar, the master said, Rabbi Meir Amar pigul v'chayav and olive kares. Mechti, let us see. Kares lo mechayev ad sheyikravu kol matirav. There is no kares until all of the permitters are brought, until they're all offered. Diomar Mar, because the master said, Kehartsoas kosher kachartsoas pasol, just like the kosher carbon when it's accepted, so too that's how we determine when it's going to be pasol, again in terms of the halachos of pigul. Mahartsoas kosher ad sheyikravu kol matirav, just like you have to have all of the permitters to be brought by a carbon in order for it to be an accepted carbon. Afartsoas psol, so too when it comes to being accepted in terms of disqualification, ad sheyikravu kol matir, of all of the matir and all of the permitters need to be brought. And so the Gemara continues and asks, but when the person sprinkled the blood inside, this is talking about in the Kodesh Kadoshim on Yom Kippur, and he had the wrong intention at that time, so that obviously is a disqualified application of the blood. It should be like he didn't sprinkle at all. And Kihadr Madi Behechol, so when he goes ahead and he sprinkles again now in the Heichol outside of the Kodesh Kadoshim, so Maya Bial Mahudukadi, we should say that it's just like he's sprinkling water, and he really never brought all of the matir and all of the permitters, and therefore it should not be pigul in such a situation. And Rashi explains, Michti, let us see, kares lo mechayev ad sheyikravu kol matirov, meaning shetechlena avodosov. There's only kares when you actually finish all of the avoda. The Amar Mar, as the master said, beperek sheni in the second perek. And so Rashi continues, Ki hadar madi beheichol maya bialma kamadi. All he's sprinkling is it's like he's sprinkling water in the heichol. V'nimsa shelo zorak dama, wouldn't it come out that he really hasn't done the zurika sadam? He hasn't really applied all of the blood. Matana achas mehen makeves, because again we say over there that even one application missing, that's you have to do every application. They're all required. To bishlama mefagel b'shchita. Now, granted, in a situation, let's say during the slaughtering, he has a machsheves pigel. He has an intention to consume the korban outside of the proper time. Afagav deposle v'hadar zaruk lei, even though he's at that point disqualified it, and then he goes ahead and does the zrika, he throws the blood, o b'machshava o b'shtika, either with an intention or he does it in silence. Kevan depigel ba'avoda, since again he had that machsheves pigel by the avoda v'shuvlo hotzi bo machsheves psul acher, and then there was no other puzzle intention, no other disqualifying intention. Afal pisha zrikas damo dam puzzle, even though he's throwing the blood and it's dam puzzle, it's like disqualified blood, or it's like he's throwing it in disqualification. But kevan de Rabbi Rachmana pigel b'shchita. But since the Torah says there is a concept of pigel by the slaughtering, we already know there's such a concept. Kedamran b'perek rishon, like we say in the first perek, b'dvarim hameviyim lidei achila hakasam medaber, everything that brings the korban to be eaten, that's where you have machsheves pigel. So al karchach b'hachi amar Rachmana lepigel. So you have to say that the Torah is saying that's pigel. Uzrikazu kimo shehi meratza lepigul, and obviously we consider the zrika to be a zrika in terms of letting the korban be accepted for the purpose of pigul. And the same would actually be true according to the Rabbanan, who say that you need to have that intention throughout the entire zrika. They don't say mefaglin b'chatzi matir. You would say the same logic, because again, the idea is that there is a concept of pigul by the zrika. And even according to the one who says that the reasoning of Rabbi Meir is because everything follows his original intention, and so therefore it's as if he had a bad intention that entire avoda. So there the Torah says that it's pigul. That's the only way we can find a case of pigul by zrika. But if you're going to say that Rabbi Meir is saying it's pigul because there can be pigul by chatzi matir, so ein kan zrika, so then you don't even have a zrika. Kevan de lo gomer machsheves pigul, because he never concluded the machsheves pigul. V'yasa sofa ladas kashera, he did the later applications of blood as if it was kosher. So zil hacha chatzi avoda, he v'zil hacha chatzi avodi. So then either way you look at it, it's just half an avoda. He never really completed the zrika. So there specifically, we're going to have this problem. And the Gemara continues and answers. Amar Rabba says, Mashkachas lo bi'arba pardim. You could come out with a scenario again where you're going to have pigul bechatzi matir. Let's say there are 4 bulls, uvedalet seirim, or let's say there are 4 goats. And Rashi explains, Mashkachas lo hada kamer Rabbi Meir pigul. When Rabbi Meir says it's pigul again bechatzi matir, you can come up with a case bi'arba parim. Let's say by 4 bulls. Pigul bein habadim b'chol matanosov. Let's say there's an intention of pigul bein habadim. Again, that's referring to the Kodesh Kadoshim in all the applications of blood that happen in the Kodesh Kadoshim. V'nishbach hadam, and then let's say the blood spills, and so you can't continue to do the applications outside of the Kodesh Kadoshim. V'shachar acher, so you have to slaughter another animal. V'hiz ala paroches, and now you continue the applications on the paroches. V'yechor ala hakarnos, and then you have to slaughter one, let's say for the corners of the mizbeach. V'yechor l'tia rosh al mizbeach, and then one for the mizbeach itself. V'kevan the kaimul on b'seder yuma, and since we've established in Meseches yuma kulu kapara b'fnei atzmo that each animal is considered its own atonement in this case. V'yavdinu kilchasan miskashra avoda b'hachi, and if you would have done it according to the halacha, the avoda would be kosher. Afilu l'rabbanan depligi olayu to Rabbi Shimon and Rebbe Lazar, and that's even according to the Rabbanan who argue on Rabbi Shimon and Rebbe Lazar, b'nishbach hadam be'emtza matanos. They argue in a case, let's say in the middle of the applications of blood in the Kodesh Kodashim it spills, they argue whether you have to start over or whether you can continue. But Baham Modu, but in this case actually they admit, because we say all of the applications in the Kodesh Kodashim are like one unit, all of the applications on the Parochas are another unit, etc. You don't have to go start over again and sprinkle the blood in a place in that area where you did all the hazos, all of the sprinklings, kedamina hasam, like we say over there, and we mentioned this on the previous summit as well. Hilkach, therefore, hachanami pigel. So here also it will be considered pigel. Sharei karvu matirav shel kol echad, because each matir as a unit has been brought on its own. V'nigmro havoda b'chaveiro, and then the avoda is finished again with the other animal. Avol b'par echad, but according to this answer, let's say it would just be one bull moder Rabbi Meir delo pigel. Then actually Rabbi Meir would admit that we wouldn't say pigel b'chatzi matir mishum delo gamar zrika me'olam, because that's not considered at all finishing the zrika. And the Gemara continues. Rava Amar Rava says afilu tema b'par echad v'sar echad. You can even say mefaglin b'chatzi matir, by one bull, by one goat, because we simply say lefigulo meratza. As far as pickle is concerned, those zrikas in fact will be accepted. Rashi explains lefigulo meratza ki hechi, just like dimchasha b'shchita karilo lizrika dam hapsul hazeh karvu matirav. Let's say he had the wrong intention by the slaughtering, but the zrika that's done after that is considered that the matir was brought l'ratzos lepigulo. It's accepted as far as pigul is concerned. And so therefore, ki chashiv lebechatzi zrika nami, when he has the intention in half of the zrika, pigul intention, v'shasak bechatzia, and he's silent in the other half, calls man shelo eir b'machshava acheres, have a ritza lepigul. As long as he doesn't mix in any other machshava, it will be accepted as far as pigul is concerned. And the Gemara continues, the Bryce on the previous summit said, Arboim v'shalosh, that on Yom Kippur there's a total of 43 applications of blood. The Gemara asks, V'atanya, but didn't we learn in a Bryce, Arboim v'sheva, that it's actually 47 applications of blood? And the Gemara answers, Hakaman do'amar ma'orvin l'kranos, v'hakaman do'amar ein ma'orvin l'kranos. One is according to the one who says that we mix the bloods of the bull and the goat together when we apply that blood to the four corners of the inner mizbeach, and so therefore you have a total of 4 in terms of those applications. But then there's another mandomer that says we don't mix the blood of the bull and the goat, and so therefore you're going to do 4 applications from the bull and 4 applications from the goat, and so therefore there's an additional 4, and that's why instead of 43, it is actually 47. And the Gemara continues, Vatanya, but then we learn in another brisa, our boy Mushmona, that there's actually 48 applications of blood, and the Gemara says to that, Hakaman Damar Shirayim Ma'akvin, that follows the one who says that pouring the remainder to the base of the Mizbeach is required, so that's an additional one, and Hakaman Damar and Shirayim Ma'akvin, and the other one, which only has 47, says that the remainder of blood pouring it to the base of the Mizbeach is not Ma'akev, is not required. The pouring of the remnant of the blood to the base of the Mizbeach is specifically to the outer Mizbeach. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. Meisvei, we have a question on Reish Lakish's understanding of Rabbi Meir from the following brisa. Again, Reish Lakish understands that Rabbi Meir means that if a person has a pigul intent in the first half, let's say you have 2 matirim, so he has a pigul intent in the first of those 2 matirim, so then we say al das rishona, what he does the second one, let's say that's done in silence, we assume that that's with the same pigul intention. That was Reish Lakish's understanding of Rabbi Meir. The other understanding of Rabbi Meir is simply to say mefaglin b'chatzi matir. Again, if you have 2 matirim, if you have 2 permitters, let's say for example there's multiple applications of blood that are required, that's more than 1 permitter, so then even if you have a machshavas pigul in just one of those permitters, that's enough to create pigul. You also have a case, let's say by a karban mincha, so there you're going to burn on the mizbeach both the kometz and the levona. Those are 2 matirin. So again, the question would be, is Rabbi Meir saying that as long as you have a machshavas pigul in either one of them, mefaglin b'chatzi matir, becomes pigul, or is it specifically in the first one, whichever one you do first, you have the machshavas pigul, and then we assume that the second one is al das rishona. And so again, the Gemara continues and asks from this brisa. The brisa says, when do we say that it's pigul? B'kmitza, b'matan kliu, v'hiluch. Let's say when you're taking the fistful, when you're placing it in the vessel, when you're conveying it to the mizbeach. Avol bolo lahaktara, but let's say it's the time of burning it on the mizbeach. And nosan es hakometz b'machshava v'salavona b'shtika. Let's say he's going to place the kometz, he burns the kometz with the wrong intention, intention, but the frankincense in silence. Or let's say it's the kometz that's done in silence, and the frankincense is with the machshavas pigul. So Rabbi Meir Omer pigul v'chayav and all of kares. Rabbi Meir says it's pigul, and there's a liability to kares. V'chachamim Omer, and the chachamim say ein bo kares hachi yefagel b'chol hamatir. It's only kares if you have a pigul intention in the entire matir. And so Katani Mia, the Gemara says, nevertheless, how is it written in this brisa? It says es hakometz b'shtika v'es halavona b'machshava. It sounds like first the kometz is offered in silence with no machshavas pigul, with no wrong intention, but then subsequent after that the lavona is burned with a machshavas pigul, with an intention to consume the carbon outside of the proper time. And so you see, even in that situation, upolik, there's a machlokas. Rabbi Meir says that it's pigul in that case. Apparently Rabbi Meir is saying mefaglin b'chatzi matir, because here the machshavas pigul was second, so you can't say it's al das rishona. And the Gemara continues and answers, Eima kvar nosan es halavona b'machshava. You have to change a little bit the text. Really what the brisa means is he already had placed the lavona with the wrong intent, and so the lavona really was first. That's how Reish Lakish would explain the brisa. The Gemara asks on this explanation two questions. Chada, number one, the first question is, Dahainu Reisha, then that would be exactly the same as the first case. Why teach two cases that are essentially identical? V'yoden further, Hatanya v'yacharkach. We learned in a brisa the words v'yacharkach, that really it is afterwards. And if you have the words v'yacharkach, that implies again that it is at the second one of the matirim that the person had this intention, and that again would indicate mefaglin b'chatzi matir. And the Gemara says to that kasha, the Gemara says, indeed, this is difficult. And Rashi explains, V'yod hatanya, further we learned, Bebraisa achrisi, we learned in another Braisa, O shenosan es hakometz b'shtika v'acharkach, nosan lavona b'machshava. In this version of the Braisa, it actually has the words v'acharkach. Clearly it's the lavona being done second with the machshavas pigul, and again the Gemara said kasha, the Gemara left that as a difficulty. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, V'elu devarim shein chayavin aleim misham pigul. The following things, there is no liability to pigul, hakometz v'haketores v'halavona, by the kometz, again the fistful, the ketores, the incense, the lavona, the frankincense. And Rashi explains, Elu devarim shein chayavin alein kares ba'achiloson misham pigul. There's no kares in eating them because of pigul. Hakometz, talking about the kometz, meaning im komatz lechol shirayim lamocher. Let's say he did the kmitza and he had intention to eat the remainder the next day, so that's a machshavas pigul. V'nispag lo hamincha, and so the mincha, the carbon mincha, does become pigul. Ein ha'ochel es hakometz bekares. The person who eats the kometz is not going to get kares. She'ena pigul chal ela al davar sheyesh lo matir nacherim, because pigul only takes effect on something where there's something else that matters it. V'hakometz ein acher matiro. The kometz, there's not something that permits it. Ki hua matir es hamincha. That's the thing that permits the carbon mincha. V'chein lavona. The same is true by the frankincense. V'chein kulam, and that's true with everything listed in this Mishnah. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Gimel Amud Aleph.